Hi and welcome to Shorts in Psychology. In today's video we're going to discuss persuasion, how attitudes can be changed, and some of the factors that influence persuasive communication. Attitudes are not chiselled in granite. They can change after they've been formed. Persuasion is a natural and necessary part of our interactions with other members of society. There are two ways we make decisions and hence get persuaded. When we are motivated and able to pay attention, we take a logical, conscious thinking, central route to decision making. This can lead to permanent change in our attitude as we adopt and elaborate upon the speaker's arguments. In other cases, we take the peripheral route. Here we do not pay attention to persuasive arguments, but are swayed instead by surface characteristics such as whether we like the speaker. In this case, although we do change, it is only temporary. The Elaboration Likelihood Model, or ELM, seeks to explain how humans process stimuli differently, and the outcomes of these processes on changing attitudes and consequently behaviour. When a persuader presents information to an audience, a level of elaboration results. Elaboration refers to the amount of effort an audience member has to use in order to process and evaluate a message, remember it, and then accept or reject it. People either experience low or high elaboration, and whichever of these will determine whether they use the central or peripheral processing route. The central processing route involves a high level of elaboration. Here the audience scrutinises the message's contents rather than reads casually because of a high motivation level. The audience knows what's important to them. Consequently, they will invest in examining a credible design's message. So if the audience is persuaded via central route processing, they will have focused on the message's strengths, and a choice is carefully considered. Because they'll be reckoning so much on what the message is telling them, a decision to agree with it will be because of the audience's work, i.e. thought. This results in a lasting attitude change that resists fading and counterattacks. One of the best ways motivating people to take the central route is to make the message personally relevant to them. Fear can also be effective in making them pay attention, but only if it is moderate and a solution is also offered. Strong fear will just lead to fight or flight reactions. People are more motivated to use the central route when the issue has personal relevance to them. Some people have a higher need for cognition, deliberately thinking about more things than people with a lower need. These people with a higher need for cognition are more likely to choose the central route. The peripheral processing route involves a low level of elaboration. The audience isn't scrutinising the message for its effectiveness. As such, other factors can influence him or her, including distractions and superficial cues like colour, catchy music, and the attractiveness of the presenter. The peripheral processing route is effective for young audiences and those who know that they want an item but do not know much about the detail of that item. For example, someone wanting a new laptop that's good but cheap is more likely to process by the peripheral route than one who is knowledgeable about the specific features of laptops. The persuasiveness of a communication is not determined merely by the logical quality of the argument. There are several factors that will affect how likely a change of attitude through persuasion is. According to the Yale communication model, the qualities of persuasive communication fall into 4 general categories: characteristics of the source, who's presenting the information, the communication or message itself, the channel of communication, which is the how, and the characteristics of the audience, the people who hear it. There are many characteristics of the source or speaker that can influence the persuasiveness of a message. These include expertise, trustworthiness, likability, and status. The credibility of a source relates to the information about the specific argument being presented and is not to be confused with intelligence or education level. The attractiveness of a source, which includes people who are not only physically attractive, but also those who are popular and famous, has shown to be very effective. Think of how many times you have seen celebrities in advertising or promoting social and political campaigns. Generally, the persuasiveness of attractive speakers seems to be limited to relatively unimportant issues like advertising. The source's intent can also influence persuasiveness. Often hidden camera testimonials where one individual is recommending a product to another rather than obviously intending to change your opinion are more effective. Several message factors have been intensively investigated for their relative power in inducing attitude change. Fear appeals, such as health campaigns using graphic images, can often enhance persuasion. For example, television advertising may remind you that if you drink, don't drive, and reinforces this message with graphic scenes of carnage on the roads. The audience will respond favourably to fear-inducing persuasive communication if the emotional appeal is relatively strong. The audience thinks the fearful outcome is likely to happen to them, and the message offers an effective way of avoiding the fearful outcome. At high levels of fear, there is a fall-off in attitude change, which could be due to lack of attention to the stimulus or the disruptive effects of intense emotion. One versus two-sided arguments depends on the characteristics of the audience. If the audience is against the argument but is fairly intelligent, it is more effective to present both sides. This is also true for audiences that are knowledgeable about both sides of the issue. It is better to present only one side, however, if the audience is already on side and rather less intelligent. Message framing is the way problems are presented to us in words or framed, and strongly influences how we solve those problems. For example, if the issue of affirmative action is presented as equal opportunity rather than reverse discrimination, people will view it more favourably. Often, evaluatively biased language is used. Examples of this type of language in advertising include slogans such as offer and value for money. In advertising in particular, repetition is often used as it is believed that a message needs to be repeated often in order to be both understood and recalled. Repeated exposure to an object clearly increases familiarity with that object and can lead to acceptance of a product as a natural item to buy. Interestingly, research has found that repetition of a name can make that name seem famous, and repetition of statements can make them seem truer. Which has more impact on the audience, video, audio, or printed media? It depends. If the message is simple, video is usually more effective, followed by audio and written. However, if the message requires considerable processing by the audience, a written medium is likely to be best. Readers have the chance to go back at will, mull over what is being said, and then read on. Direct experience can be a powerful persuader, as it enables the source to interact easily with the audience and can result in a more durable attitude change. The audience are the intended target of a persuasive communication. There are many characteristics of the audience that can influence the effectiveness of persuasion. These include intelligence. Less intelligent audiences are generally easier to persuade, except when the message is complex and difficult to understand. Individuals with moderate self-esteem are usually easier to convince than those with high or low self-esteem. Persons with high self-esteem are generally very confident of their opinions and therefore difficult to influence. Persons with low self-esteem tend not to pay attention to the communication enough to be swayed. Individual differences, including personality, need for cognition, and preference for consistency, have all been shown to influence persuasion. The central processing route is generally more effective with those with a greater need for cognition. People with a high need for social approval are also generally easier to persuade, particularly through the peripheral processing route. A relationship between age and susceptibility to attitude change has also been suggested. Susceptibility to attitude change is high in early adulthood and gradually decreases across the lifespan. Core attitudes, values, and beliefs are crystallized during a period of great plasticity in early adulthood, often referred to as the impressionable years. Lastly, the size of the audience can influence persuasion. Groups and bigger crowds are often easier to persuade than alone or a smaller crowd. To finish, let's look at a past exam question. I'm only going to go through the first 2 dot points in this video. However, we have covered all the content required to answer the entire extended response question. So when you pause the video to answer this question, I would encourage you to attempt all 4 dot points. You could apply any of the mentioned source factors to this scenario. The main thing is to ensure that you discuss how your 2 chosen factors would influence the effectiveness of the campaign. You also need to make sure that you're discussing 2 distinct factors and not 2 aspects of physical attractiveness, for example. Having said that, you could discuss 2 attractiveness features such as physical appearance and popularity or fame. Credibility and expertise would also be straightforward to justify for this scenario, as would trustworthiness. Giving an example of who the guest speaker could be that relates to your discussed factors would also be a good idea. Be careful of using terms like reliability incorrectly, instead of referring to credibility or trustworthiness. For the second dot point, the type of appeal, such as using fear and presenting a 1 versus 2-sided argument, would probably be the easiest to apply to an anti-smoking program. However, you could also describe message framing using some examples of evaluatively biased language that could be used. Some examples of this from real anti-smoking campaigns include "Stop Smoking, Start Repairing" and $16 a pack isn't all smokers cough up. As it is a guest speaker, other message factors such as repetition and novelty don't apply as much here. Remember, I'm always happy to read practice extended responses and provide feedback, so feel free to email me your answer to this question. I hope this video has helped clarify the roots of persuasion and the factors that influence its effectiveness. Thanks for listening.